Alright everybody, so this is going to be a reattempt at a previous video I did, and the audio turned out not so good on it, and I pulled it off my channel. Pardon my bed head hair. Just dropped off my dog at the vet. So what I was talking about, there is a reason for narcissistic rage. Why are they so explosive? Why is it that they just get disproportionately mad about stuff? And especially because the most unfair thing about narcissistic rage is that when they're upset and they're mad, it's okay, like, because it's somebody else's fault. But the very moment that you lose your ability to control your shit, then they hit you with stuff like you shouldn't be mad, like you don't get mad at it, or they say, oh, get over it, or they dismiss it. So when you're upset, and not even half as upset as they get, apparently you are intolerable. But whenever they go to watch the world burn, the world deserved it, right? And it's just completely unfair, objectively and emotionally. It's hypocritical. And it's just, well, they just suck when they do that, right? And there's a lot of content out there about narcissistic rage and how it's a manipulation tactic and how they do it to pummel you into submission and how it makes them feel strong and powerful, blah, blah, blah. And yes, that's it some of the time, but if you have spent as much time around them as I have, like your entire so many decades long life, you know that that's not always the case. There's something else going on under there, because when you try to mitigate it as if they are being manipulative, it doesn't work either. And then you get online and you watch more videos that suggest how to handle them, and that doesn't work either. And then you get frustrated. You think, well, maybe they're not a narcissist. Maybe they're not disordered. Maybe it is me. And I see this and I hear this a lot. But no, you're not imagining it. There is something else going on under the surface, and I want to get into that. So why does it seem that they just get mad for the craziest reasons? Well, it's not always to throw you off the scent. It's not always about you, believe it or not, and that's great. It is because they would rather be angry than to feel some other emotion. They substitute it. And I'm going to explain this. So with narcissism, when you get somebody who is so narcissistic it's disorderly, like with NPD, narcissism in these instances arises as a poor coping strategy for a borderline trait. So borderlining means you're on the borderline between a neurosis and a psychosis. Neurosis is like a nervous energy kind of thing, sort of like anxiety, or like a little puppy that just always has to chew, just going around chewing. We've all seen like the puppies that are just so wired, and you got to pet them and they're just crazy. That's neurosis, right? Psychosis is where your objective reality or experiential reality is different from literally everybody else around you. We see the good example of psychosis is schizophrenia, but perhaps one we're all familiar with is sleepwalking and sleep talking, right? That is it's technically not a psychosis, but I'm giving you something tangible to think about, right? So when you're borderline, you are literally right on the line of both of those. And as a result, what it is it's like this nervous, anxious energy that is brewing around some kind of delusion, right? And again, there's nuance to it, but generally that's what it is. You know, and we've seen this where a narcissist or somebody who's just dramatic, people who are overly dramatic, it's a perfect example of someone being dramatic, where they're losing their shit and twisting off over something that is really just not a big deal, right? Oh, that is borderlining. And so narcissism arises from an individual's attempts to wrest control over their life, right? So one of the traits of borderlining, it comes from an intense fear of rejection or abandonment. So when you're borderline, it's work hard, play hard kind of psychology, but super amplified. If you think of anybody that you know who works hard, plays hard, that's a good frame of reference, right? So a borderline person, they have high degrees of emotional instability. And what that means is when they love, and they really love with all their heart, and that's a beautiful thing. But when they're hurt, my God, are they hurt? And when they are mad, my God, do they stay mad? And so they go to all of these emotional extremes. And so for all the same reasons that people get addicted to gambling, you can get addicted to relationships with these people. And that's how we end up being supply. Because of the emotional roller coaster that comes from being with them. You never know what to expect. And it is like riding a roller coaster. That's why the big roller coasters are fun. And it's why the teacup ride is fun in short intervals. But my God, is the carousel just sheer torture. Okay? It's the same kind of thing. And a narcissist gets the core of their narcissism, when it's a disorder, usually sprouts up as a way of coping with the rejections that come following severe emotional outbursts, okay? So when you're borderline, when you have trouble controlling your outbursts, you know that all relationships that come to an end seem to come to an end the same way, and it's usually over you not being able to control your shit, and shit just always ends the same way, and you hear the same things from the same people, and eventually you start to realize, well, maybe it is me, right? And so then as you go through life like this, a person that struggles with borderline tendencies starts to see the writing on the wall, and they start to predict that a relationship is coming to an end. And you'll hear them say stuff like, no, it's always the same thing. Like, everybody's just the same. Like, you're all the same. Like men are just trash. Women are just trash, right? You end up with somebody who hates the other gender. And so where narcissism comes in, it's an attempt to hedge against this rejection by being really, really good at something. So you're hedging against rejection through self-improvement. Okay? Like if you grow up and you're a really fat kid and you get bullied a lot for being fat, and you get rejected by the pretty girl or teased by the pretty girl for being fat, or by the jock, you know, if you're a big girl, right? The shame, the insult, and the guilt that comes with that, it carries on with you. And I like the movie Dodgeball because Dodgeball nails it on the head perfectly. Ben Stiller's character was a fat kid growing up. He was bullied. He was picked on. And what did he do? He opened Globo Gym and became this narcissistic bodybuilder or personal trainer, whatever you want to call his character. But he's insanely narcissistic, but he has this unhealthy relationship with food where he's kissing pizza and doing all other kinds of questionable Ben Stiller stuff with food. But that's how NPD comes about, because it's more than just narcissism. It is a heavy reliance upon needing that narcissism and the validation that you are what you are striving to be, awesome, and the need to constantly reinforce that in your head leads to this whole propping up the ego and devaluing others that becomes the pathogen of NPD. So I had to tell you all of this so that you will understand where narcissistic rage comes from, okay? Because these disorders come about as a means to avoid feeling sad, to avoid feeling rejected, to avoid feeling negative emotions. When somebody's in the wrong, when you're accused of something, you feel negative emotions, you feel sad. When something is your fault or you have to admit a mistake, there is some inherent sadness that comes along with that. Well, if you're somebody who is highly invested in never feeling sad again, because it's like, if I just become the best bodybuilder in the world, then I will never be fat. Nobody will ever see me as fat. Anybody who ever calls me fat or anything like that, well, then they're just stupid. They're just crazy, right? They're the ones with the problem, right? When you touch that sensitive little part of these people, they do not want to feel that sadness. So they will substitute another emotion, which is usually anger. But there's other ones like anxiety or paranoia, or they shift the blame to someone else. So it's like, I'm not going to feel that feeling. They can feel that feeling, right? So it's like negativity hot potato is what I like to think of it as. Anytime that they could be at fault for something or feel sad about something, they're hot potato. They put it onto somebody else. Usually back to the person that lobbed it to them, because that's how they see it. To them, that makes sense. When they start to feel bad, it's because they think that you put those feelings there, and they're going to hot potato it right back to you, which is one reason why it goes in endless cycles, right? Hot potato, hot potato, hot potato, hot potato. It's when it is their fault, it's frustrating because they won't accept it. And remember how I said how borderlining, it's on the borderline of a neurosis and a psychosis. You have to understand one very, very, very crucial fact about all of this. They're not consciously doing this most of the time. It is because they have made it such a part of their daily lives to avoid these feelings that it just becomes ingrained in their subconscious. And a lot of times, it truly is an invisible process to them. They're not aware that they are doing it. It's just the way that they understand the world, that people will try to put their negativity on you, and they are tired of being made to feel bad for somebody else's problems. And you'll hear that from them, God, so many times. But that's mainly the reason why. And so the anger is a substitution. So anytime it's a substitution for something that they would rather feel. Okay? If they're in a way, it's understandable, not excusable. My God, don't go there. But if given a choice of what negative emotion would you choose to feel, what would you feel? Anger or guilt? Generally, to be angry at someone else. And it's kind of sad. And I've mentioned this before, because another really, really just it's something that deserves understanding is borderline people. They feel disproportionate levels of pain with negative emotions, and it can be inappropriately timed feelings of pain. They can also feel inappropriately good about stuff, right? Remember how I said there it's characterized by emotional instability, right? Work hard, play hard, that kind of stuff. When they feel hard, right? Phrasing. They do. Well, of course, when they feel really happy, nobody's going to have problems with feeling super happy, right? I mean, damn, that's what everybody wants. So when they're happy, they're really happy, right? And that's usually what attracts people to them. That's what we fell in love with them for in the beginning. But then whenever they're hurt, they're really, really hurt, and they're going to put that on somebody else, and that somebody else is typically you. It is. And so you can't one way you can't really fault them, but it is still their problem. Okay. But you do, for your sanity, you benefit from understanding this, because it makes it a lot easier on you when you realize what it is that's going on. Okay, and in videos where I talk about manipulating a narcissist and using the no good Scotsman fallacy, and I say you get in there, you say your shit, and then you shut up and just let that marinate in their head, right? That's why you have to understand that when they're angry, they're sad or frustrated, or they're feeling some other negative emotion. And it's going to hurt them a lot. And when I say disproportionate pain, I mean they will feel like funeral level grief over something mundane, like not replying to their text fast enough. That's insane. It is. It's crazy. They're crazy like that. But they're also kind of stuck with that. There's not much they can do about that. So they're just doing what they can. It's not really something you can fault, but you also have to understand it for what it is. Okay? And that is what it is. So when they get mad at you, I'm gonna leave you with this. When they're mad, it's a sign that you're right. And it's a sign that it is actually their fault. Okay, we're so used to someone else's apology or recognition or admission to be our validation and confirmation that we were right the entire time. But with somebody who's a narcissist or a borderline, it's actually the opposite. Like when they apologize, there's nothing behind it. When they admit it, it's like, okay, yeah, you're right, it's totally me. It's disingenuous, so they're backwards like that, right? So when they do actually get mad at you and try to put it on you, chances are good, and maybe not every time, but for the most part, that typically is a sign that they do in fact feel guilt, and they do feel like it is their fault. And so they're not accepting it. It's so backwards, but you've got to twist your brain to understand this. And that's one reason why I've given you all this information. And I apologize it's so long. I'm over my typical time limit, but it is really important that you understand this, that when it is their fault, they will not admit it, they will not accept it, they will not apologize. If they do, well, then they actually don't think it's their fault, and that's why they're okay with saying that, because then they're like, you know what? Because from them, the kind of empathy they feel is they think that you feel the way that they feel. Like they just need to hear somebody say, I'm sorry, right? I'll just placate them. And that's where that comes from, right? So it's not necessarily, it's not always poorly intended. And again, as I said, mental health is such a complex issue. Yes, there are exceptions to everything I'm telling you, but there are things that are not. Not everybody is the same way. So, but there are times where this does hold true. And it's up to you to just never stop learning, never stop trying to improve yourself and to improve your understanding of the world around you and the people you're surrounded with, particularly if they are people you are stuck with. Narcissists are a gypsy curse. You cannot get rid of them. You can only give them to somebody else. Fortunately, and if you're stuck with somebody who is a narcissist, you can't get rid of them. You will do so much better to treat them as if they are a borderline, since that is at its core. And borderline disorders are indeed manageable. They're not curable, but they can be managed. As a matter of fact, borderlines depend on other people for their emotional regulation. And I've done a more recent video on this as to the undiscussed reason as to why conflicts never end why they're an endless conflict seeker. Okay, that's another good one to check out, because it also relies on this, and the two are related. Borderline disorders are manageable and treatable. In 2021, more people are coming forward with their mental health issues. The good thing is, a borderline disorder, it's a lesser known, lesser talked about phenomenon than narcissism. So if you call somebody a narcissist, they're instantly going to respond negatively to that. But you can become a narcissist whisperer if you do some reading on borderline disorders and DBT and CBT, and just feed them little DBT nuggets and kibble, and you can kind of manage them that way. But most importantly, you have to manage your perception of it, because that's what you can control. That's what you have control over in your life. And so, of course, that's how I recommend you do it. Anyways, I've talked long enough about this. I'm going to do more videos like this because it is such an insanely large topic. I can't just do one video on it and cover everything. But do please like, comment, or share. If you made it this far, you are a god. And I'm pretty sure your legs are numb from sitting on the toilet this long. So go ahead, wipe, stand up, limp away, get through the pins and needles, and I'll see y'all on the next video.